When Sandra didn't pick his calls, Keanu Reeves knocked on her door. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Silence. Keanu stared at the glowing screen, waiting for her voice, waiting for that gentle laugh he had heard so many times before. But the call ended with no answer. He tried again, and once more the silence felt heavier than before. In that quiet moment, a shadow of worry began to grow inside his chest. Sandra always answered. Maybe not on the first ring, but she always found a way to let him know she was fine. Tonight, there was nothing. The world saw Keanu as the strong man who had survived loss, the star who never showed weakness. But inside his home that night, he was simply a friend, desperate to hear a voice that mattered to him. He tried again. Still no answer. His thoughts moved quickly like waves crashing in his mind. What if she was upset with him? What if something had gone wrong? What if she was alone and needed him? He sat back on the couch, his fingers pressing against his forehead. Memories of their friendship rushed into his heart. The way Sandra once told him that life is like a fragile glass, easy to break if not held with care. The times she reminded him that kindness is more powerful than pride. She had always been there for him, in silence and in storms. So why wasn't she answering now? The clock ticked past midnight, but Keanu's heart refused to rest. He knew he could not stay still. He grabbed his jacket, slipped on his shoes, and walked out into the night. The streets were quiet, the air cool against his face, yet his steps were heavy with worry. Each sound of his boots on the pavement was matched by the sound of his heart pounding harder. When he reached her home, he paused at the gate. The lights inside were dim, almost as if the house itself was holding its breath. He walked closer, his hand brushing against the wooden frame of the door. He hesitated, then knocked softly. The sound was gentle, but in the silence of the night it felt like thunder. No answer. He knocked again, this time louder, his voice following. "Sandra, it's me." Still silence. His thoughts grew darker, filled with doubt and fear. Was she upset with him? Had he missed something important? Or was something truly wrong inside that quiet house? The street behind him was empty. The world seemed to have vanished, leaving only him and the unanswered door. In that moment, Keanu felt a truth rise in him. Friendship is not about comfort when it is easy. It is about standing when worry shakes you, about showing up when silence feels like a wall. He pressed his forehead against the door, whispering words she could not hear. "I am here, no matter what." Then, from inside, a faint sound stirred. It was not laughter, not a voice calling out, but the soft shuffle of footsteps. The silence cracked and hope pushed through his chest as the lock clicked slowly. Keanu held his breath, waiting to see what truth waited on the other side of that door. The door opened slowly, and in that narrow crack of light, Keanu saw Sandra standing there. Her eyes looked tired, her hair was not neatly brushed like usual, and her voice was soft when she said, "Keanu, why are you here so late?" He wanted to smile, to ease the worry that had built inside him, but the look on her face told him that something was not right. Her eyes carried a weight, a sadness that she was trying to hide behind calm words. Keanu stepped closer, careful not to rush her, and whispered, "You did not answer my calls. I was worried." Sandra turned her face slightly away, as if she did not want him to see the truth in her eyes. "I just needed some time alone," she said, her voice almost breaking. Keanu knew those words well. He had used them himself many times when the pain of life became too heavy. Alone time was not always about peace. Sometimes it was about carrying a burden so big you did not want anyone else to feel it. He placed his hand gently on the doorframe and asked, "May I come in?" Sandra hesitated for a moment, then stepped back and opened the door wider. The house was quiet, the lights dim, and there was a stillness that felt heavy in the air. Keanu walked in slowly, taking off his jacket and placing it carefully on a chair. He looked around and noticed little details. A cup of tea half finished on the table, books scattered on the couch, and a blanket crumpled as if she had been sitting there for hours without moving. They both sat down, silence filling the space between them. Finally, Keanu spoke. "You do not have to hide from me, Sandra. You have always been my strength when I felt weak. Let me be that for you now." Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. She turned toward him and said softly, "Keanu, I feel like the world is moving too fast and I cannot keep up. Everyone sees me as strong, but inside I am tired. I do not want to disappoint anyone, yet I feel I already have." Her words cut deep into his heart because he knew exactly how that felt. Fame, expectations, the constant demand to be perfect. It was a cage that both of them had lived in. He reached for her hand, holding it gently, his voice steady but full of care. "You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to carry the world. You only need to be yourself. And for me, that is more than enough." She squeezed his hand back, the warmth of his words giving her the first comfort she had felt all day. But even as their silence grew softer, there was still a storm inside her. She looked at him and asked, "Why do you always show up for me, Keanu? Even when I push you away, you come back." He smiled faintly, though his eyes carried years of unspoken pain. "Because I know what it feels like when no one shows up. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would never let someone I care about feel that alone." Her tears finally fell, and she leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. The night outside was silent, but inside the room there was the sound of healing, the sound of two souls finding strength in each other's company. Yet even in that moment of peace, Keanu sensed something more. He felt that Sandra was holding back a truth she had not yet spoken, something that could explain the silence of her phone and the sadness in her eyes. He knew the night was far from over. Keanu sat still, his arm gently around Sandra's shoulder while her head rested quietly against him. The house was silent except for the soft sound of her breathing. But in her silence he could feel the weight of words unspoken, like a door she was not ready to open. After a long pause, Sandra whispered, "Keanu, there is something I have not told anyone. I have kept it inside because I did not want to look weak. But the truth is, I cannot carry it anymore." His heart tightened as he heard her voice tremble. He turned slightly toward her, his hand steady on hers, and said, "You do not need to be afraid with me. Whatever it is, I'm here. I will listen." She lifted her head slowly, her eyes red from tears, and finally let the truth escape. "I have been battling a fear I cannot shake. It feels like I am losing control of my own life. I wake up some days and I do not recognize myself. And when I look in the mirror, I see someone tired, someone lost. That is why I did not answer your calls." I felt ashamed. Keanu's eyes softened. He had heard many confessions in his life, but this one pierced him deeper than most. Not because it shocked him, but because it was the same fear he had faced many times. The fear of being swallowed by shadows while the world demanded smiles. He leaned closer, his voice calm and gentle. "Sandra, listen to me. There is nothing shameful about feeling lost. I know that pain. I know the nights when silence feels louder than any crowd. But you are not alone in this. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to hurt." Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but the words dissolved into tears. Keanu held her hand tighter, grounding her in his presence. Then, in a voice softer than the night itself, she asked him, "Keanu, do you ever feel like the world only loves you when you are strong and forgets you when you are weak?" He closed his eyes for a moment, memories rushing back. The losses he had suffered, the empty spaces in his life, the times when he smiled on the screen while his heart was breaking inside. He nodded slowly and said, "Yes, I have felt that more than once. But I learned something through it all. The people who truly love us are the ones who stay when we are weak. They are the ones who see the broken pieces and still call us whole." Those words broke through the last wall around her heart. She leaned into him again, letting his strength hold her where hers had faded. For the first time that night, a small breath of relief escaped her, as if she had finally allowed herself to rest. Yet even as they sat there, Keanu sensed that her struggle was not just about fear or sadness. There was something deeper, something she was still holding back. Her silence on the phone, her tears tonight. It was all leading to a truth she had not yet spoken. The night outside was calm, but inside the room the air was heavy with secrets, waiting to be revealed. The room stayed quiet for a long time, the kind of quiet that does not feel empty but heavy, like something waiting to break. Keanu held her hand gently, giving her the space she needed, knowing that forcing words out of her heart would only make the pain sharper. Finally, Sandra lifted her face from his shoulder. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but they carried a new kind of strength, the strength of someone ready to speak even when it hurt. "Keanu," she whispered, "there is more. I did not just ignore your calls because I was sad. I did it because I was afraid to let you see what I was going through. I thought you would see me differently." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "There is nothing you could tell me that would make me turn away." "Nothing." Her lips trembled. She took a slow breath and then spoke the words she had buried deep. "I went to the doctor last month. The results were not good. They told me I need treatment. I tried to hide it, even from myself, but I cannot anymore. I am scared, Keanu. I am scared of losing everything, of losing myself." His heart dropped. The silence after her words was heavy, almost crushing. He felt the weight of her fear press into his chest, but he did not flinch. Instead, he took her trembling hands into his own, his voice steady even though his heart was breaking. "Sandra, you are not alone in this. You will never face it alone. I promise you." Her tears flowed freely now, but with them came a small light of relief. "I did not want to tell you. I thought you had already carried too much pain in your life. I did not want to add mine to yours." Keanu shook his head slowly, his eyes shining with quiet strength. "Pain shared is never a burden. It is a bridge. And if you let me, I will walk every step of this road with you." Those words broke through the wall of fear inside her. She leaned forward and hugged him tightly, as if letting herself believe for the first time that she did not have to face the storm alone. The clock ticked softly in the background, but neither of them noticed. The night had become something else, a place where truth and vulnerability had turned into strength. Yet, even in that moment of closeness, Keanu felt a shadow lingering in his heart. He knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be nights darker than this one, moments harder than tonight's confession. But he also knew something else. Love, in its truest form, is not about avoiding the storm. It is about standing together in the rain until the sun rises again. The morning light crept through the curtains, soft and golden, but the weight in the room was still heavy. Sandra had fallen asleep on the couch, her head resting near Keanu's shoulder. He had not slept at all. His eyes had stayed open through the long hours, watching over her, guarding her in silence as if his presence could shield her from the fear that haunted her heart. When she stirred awake, her eyes met his and she whispered, "You stayed the whole night." Keanu gave a small nod. "I was not going to leave you alone. Not when you needed me most." Her lips curved in a faint smile, but her voice still carried sadness. "I do not know if I have the strength to face what comes next." Keanu leaned closer, his tone steady and filled with quiet resolve. "You do not need to carry it alone. Strength does not mean walking alone into the storm. It means letting someone walk beside you." Those words settled in her heart, and for a moment she let herself believe in them. But the day was waiting, and with it came the reality she had tried to run from. By afternoon, Sandra had to meet her doctor for another appointment. The silence in the car as Keanu drove her there was filled with both fear and unspoken trust. Inside the clinic, the walls were white and cold, and the ticking of the clock on the wall felt louder than anything else. Sandra's hands shook slightly as she filled out the forms. Keanu noticed and quietly reached for her hand. She looked at him, her eyes glistening, and he whispered, "We will face this together." The doctor came in with a calm voice but serious eyes. He explained the treatment, the risks, the steps ahead. Sandra's heart raced with every word, but Keanu's presence beside her kept her grounded. He asked questions, not as an actor or a star, but as a friend who refused to let fear win. After the appointment, as they stepped back into the sunlight, Sandra stopped and looked at him. "Keanu, you do not have to do this. You have your own life, your own battles. Why are you choosing to carry mine too?" He paused, the sunlight casting a glow across his tired face. "Because real friendship is not about sharing the easy days. It is about showing up when the nights are darkest. I have lost people I loved because I could not save them. I will not stand by and let fear steal you away. If there is a fight to be had, we will fight it together." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not just tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude, of knowing that even in her weakest moment, she was not abandoned. As they drove home, the silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with a new strength, a bond forged in truth and trust. But deep inside, Keanu knew the hardest days were still ahead, and he also knew something else, that his promise to never leave her side would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The days that followed were not easy. Every morning, Sandra faced the mirror with a heavy heart, and every evening she tried to hide her fear behind a small smile. But no matter how dark the day felt, Keanu was there. Sometimes he spoke words of comfort, sometimes he sat in silence, but his presence was constant, unshaken, like an anchor holding her steady in a storm. As treatment began, the reality of her struggle grew sharper. There were days when Sandra felt strong, ready to fight, but there were also nights when she broke down, exhausted from the pain, unsure if she could go on. On those nights, Keanu stayed by her side, holding her hand, reminding her with every quiet word, "You are not alone." One evening, after a particularly hard day, Sandra sat on the floor of her living room, her back against the couch, her eyes closed as tears streamed down her face. Keanu sat beside her, not saying anything at first, simply letting her cry. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you doing this for me, Keanu? You have carried so much in your life already. Why keep carrying me too?" He turned his head slowly, his voice low but steady. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. I know what it feels like when people walk away because the road gets too hard. I swore I would never be that person. I cannot change the past, but I can be here now, and I choose to be here with you." Sandra looked at him through her tears, and for the first time in days her heart felt lighter. "You always talk about kindness as if it is the only thing that matters," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "That is because it is. Everything else fades. Fame, money, success, they all disappear, but kindness stays. It heals when nothing else can. And you have given me that kindness for years, Sandra. Now it is my turn." She leaned against him, letting his words fill the cracks in her spirit. The room was quiet, but their silence carried more power than any speech. As weeks passed, the bond between them grew stronger. They shared laughter on good days and tears on bad ones. But in every moment, there was a truth they could no longer ignore. Their friendship was no longer just friendship. It had become something deeper, something born out of respect, resilience, and an unshakable trust. Yet even as their bond deepened, the world outside kept moving, waiting for them to return. The press, the cameras, the endless attention. Sooner or later, they would have to face it. And when that day came, their private struggle would no longer be hidden. Keanu knew the fight inside Sandra's heart was far from over. But he also knew something else. The greatest battles are not fought in silence, but in the strength of two souls refusing to let go of each other. The day of truth finally came. The weeks of silence, fear, and long nights had brought Sandra and Keanu to this moment. The doctor's office was quiet, the ticking clock on the wall counting each second with a heavy sound. Sandra's hand trembled slightly, but Keanu held it tightly, steady and firm, his presence stronger than any words. The doctor spoke gently, explaining that the treatment was working. The road ahead was still long, but there was hope, real hope. Sandra closed her eyes, letting relief wash over her, and when she opened them again, the first thing she saw was Keanu's face. His eyes were calm, but shining with a quiet joy. He whispered, "I told you we would face it together." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude, of knowing she had walked through her darkest nights and found light again, not just in herself, but in the one person who refused to let go of her hand. As they left the clinic, the world outside seemed brighter. The sun felt warmer, the air lighter, and for the first time in months, Sandra smiled without forcing it. "I could not have done this without you," she said softly. Keanu shook his head. "You did this, Sandra. You fought every step. I only walked beside you." She stopped and looked at him, her voice trembling with emotion. "You call it walking beside me, but it was more. You reminded me that even in the hardest battles, love and kindness are stronger than fear. You gave me back my courage." They stood there in silence for a moment, the city moving around them, but in their small space, the world felt still. It was then that Sandra realized their story had changed. What began as unanswered calls had turned into a lesson of resilience, of trust, and of a bond stronger than either of them had ever imagined. In the weeks that followed, the world noticed their closeness. Cameras tried to capture it, reporters tried to explain it, but they never truly could. What they shared was not for headlines. It was for two souls who had carried each other when the weight of life was too heavy. Sandra once said to Keanu, "You showed me that the real strength of a person is not in how much they endure alone, but in how much they allow kindness to heal them." Keanu smiled, his voice quiet but filled with truth. "And you showed me that even when the world forgets how to be gentle, we can still choose to be gentle with each other." Their story was not about fame, not about the screen, not about what the world expected of them. It was about two people, broken in different ways, who chose to rise together. And so, when Sandra did not pick his calls and Keanu knocked on her door, it was not just the beginning of a night filled with worry. It was the beginning of a journey that taught them both the meaning of love, humility, resilience, and kindness.